Happy Monday, beautiful people. It's me again, leading you through your learning this week. I'd just like to give a shout out to Miss Reed and Miss Williams, who have delivered the last 2 weeks worth of lessons. And it's been brilliant to see so many of you engaging with your quizzes and responding. So we're really pleased. We are not, we're not immune to the idea that this is really hard for some of us, that this is all a new way of learning to do things. And we're really grateful that each week you pick up the lessons and you are practicing this new way of learning. So we're really proud of you here in school. We love the work that you're doing and how hard you're trying. So at the start of this week, get ready to practice again this new way of learning online. I'm not going to talk through these icons again. You've been able to have a little look at these just while I've been saying hello and welcoming you to this week's learning. These are just things to remind you that you might see, ways to remind you that you can respond. I would just like to say that at the moment, the official assessment that we ask of you is to do the quiz at the end of the week. Okay, the notes, the work you do in your books between now and then is to help you be ready for that quiz. Okay, so the work we get you to do each lesson doesn't need to be sent in or handed in. That's your way of learning and absorbing the new information so that come the quiz, come the end of the week, you are ready to perform. Okay, lovely. So we're having a slightly different focus this week. Okay, as you can see here, we're going to be practicing writing skills this week. And in particular today, we're not writing, we're going to be thinking out loud on paper. So if you like a title for your work, you can borrow this one, practicing writing skills. Hashtag I'm not writing, I'm thinking out loud on paper. And actually writing is a core skill that feeds into our reading, feeds into our thinking. If we see writing, reading, and thinking as three core skills, we can't actually separate them. Okay? We can't really do one without the other, not just in English, but in so many other subjects, but situations we're going to find ourselves in. So, guys, it's really important that we overcome any barriers to writing. Anything in us that rises up and sees writing as the boring part, the unnecessary part, I'm really going to just challenge you to put that way of thinking aside, to change the soundtrack in your head. So today we're not writing, we're thinking out loud on paper. And at the end of this week, this series of lessons, I would really like you to be thinking about these big ideas, that writing should never be something we're forced to do. I want you to recognize that when you choose to write, you're choosing to use words to add your voice to a bigger story. I love this term. It's a very technical term, metanarrative. And when I think about the news reports, when I think about seeing people going outside and clapping for the NHS on Thursday, when I see people putting up signs in windows, people are using words and actions to be a part of a bigger story of 2020. And I'm going to take us right back down to the mundane in a sense, because we're going to start looking at how we can use our words to formulate sentences, to plan, to contribute to a bigger story by the end of this week. Okay, and the truth is when we write words down, we make them stick. Anything we commit to paper sticks. It's very hard to lose it, to forget it. When we write things down, they stick. So sometimes we're brilliant thinkers, but not very good at remembering what we've thought. So writing is one of those tools that helps us when we think to commit and stick to some of those ideas that we have. And we must practice writing, though. It's something we have to practice doing. Okay, if we're going to add our voice to a bigger story, the bigger meta narrative, if we're going to share and explain and describe the things that are happening to us in our lives, if we want a voice that we can contribute, we recognize that writing is one of those skills we cannot do without to get that message across. So really this week, we're going to be practicing some of those skills of writing, those building blocks of writing, so that when we're ready to commit our voice, when we're ready to have something to say, we've got a means to say it. Okay, so we are going to pause a minute and write this down. So this week, our big question is, how do I become a better writer? And the quick answer is by thinking about my readers. Good writers always think about readers. Selfish writers, journal writers, people that write for themselves, don't always think about their reader, and therefore they fail to get their reader's attention. Some people start writing, they go off with their own ideas, and they lose their reader, 2 or 3 paragraphs back. So we're going to focus this week on thinking about, well, how do I become a better writer? Because we think about our readers. And that's some of the ideas that we're going to explore this week. Okay, so to help us think about becoming a better writer, thinking about our readers, I just want to quickly remind you of our reading toolkit. Okay, so we introduce these 4 skills that we do as readers. We need to visualize and see a picture in our mind. We need to be able to summarize, to shorten and select the most important ideas from what we've read. We need to be able to always think as well in terms of questioning, asking questions as you read, and being able to clarify, getting a clear idea of what you're reading. So our challenge this week is that if we think about that aspect of those 4 aspects of that toolkit, that as readers we want to do that, actually we see it's relational because writers can think in those ways too. So as we write this week, there might be moments where I ask you to visualize and say, well, what do you want your reader to imagine as they read your sentence? What do you want them to be able to see as they read your paragraph, your description? What sensations do they need to feel or experience as they're reading in order for them to have a picture in their mind? Summarizing, what do we want them to be able to understand? What are you mostly writing about? What do you want them to learn, to feel? What are you actually teaching your readers this week? How will you begin? What ideas will you develop? Where will your writing end? Okay, we also want to think about questions. Okay, what am I writing? Who's involved? Where will the events take place? When is my writing happening? And clarification. What do you really need your reader to know by the end of your writing? What do you really want them to understand? And are there any tricky ideas that you want to get across where you need to work really hard to make sure they're clear? And in order to do that then this week, we're going to build and just work around sentence levels. Okay, we're going to look at getting really good sentences to meet those needs of our readers. And we're going to practice it this week using a classic tool that they use at GCSE. Okay, in the GCSE paper, you're often going to be given images. So what we're going to look at today is a series of images, and we're going to use them to help us craft sentences to get us thinking about those skills of visualizing by giving us something to look at. Okay, so we're going to just pause in a minute. I'm going to ask you to pause your screen, and I want you just to, in note form, to write down what you see. So if you're looking at this picture, okay, we're just going to pause. What can you see? Write down any ideas that come into your mind now. Now, you might have found that really easy or really tricky. And those of us that will find it easy will probably be the sort of people whose imaginations, so what we already hold within our head, was able to make connections. They were able to look at this image and say, well, I know what I'm looking at. I'm looking at a wheat field. I'm looking at a thresher. I can see the sky. That's where prior reading and knowledge of the world can help us in our imaginations. Now, some of us might have looked at it and said, well, I don't really know what I'm looking at, but I can tell that it's like a yellow golden color. I can see a green machine in the background. So some of us begin to explain what we see using knowledge we've already got, and the picture makes a connection with what we know. Sometimes our knowledge is more sparse and we can see recognizable elements, colors, sizes, shapes, but actually we don't have the knowledge to be really specific. And the wonder of imagination is that we can work with either of those responses. So this time I want you to pause and I just want you to think about the questions that you're about to see to help you talk about this image in a bit more specific detail. So I want you to think about what you can see, where this image has been taken. Now you could start small. Are we inside, outside? We're in a field. We're in a wheat field. What's happening? Well, we could begin to fill in some gaps using those wonderful imaginations. Well, the front part of this image, things seem to have been cut down. So it could be some sort of field, some sort of harvest time. When do you think this is happening? Is it morning or afternoon or evening? Why do you think this machine is present in this field? How does this picture make you feel? How do you feel looking at this picture? Do you feel confused? Do you feel a sense of anticipation, a sense of excitement? Do you feel bored? Now, this one's a little bit harder, but you can start to think about the relationship between elements. You might start saying to yourself, well, I can see that the machine, whatever it's doing, is working through the field. It seems to be a clear sky, so maybe this is something that happens on a clear day. Okay, there seems to be light in the sky, so maybe it's a summertime picture. And you can begin to add to your notes. So I'm just going to pause now and I'm going to give yourself 2 minutes, 3 minutes, as long as you need to try and get down between 5 and 10 ideas about this image. Okay, just note form. We're not talking sentences at this stage. Off you go. Excellent. Sounded a bit like Monty Burns in Simpsons. Excellent, but brilliant. I'm really pleased you did that. Hopefully you've got some good ideas. Remember, we're planning for writing today, so these will help. Right, next step, I'm going to show you 3 other images, and there is a link between them, but each one is slightly different. So I'm literally going to put the image up. You're going to pause and make your notes. So we're going to call this one image number 1. So here we go, image number 2. What can you see? So pause your video and give yourself time to make those notes. Okay, so this time we're looking at an image that again seems to have that theme of the wheat field, but we have this very seemingly isolated home or barn in the middle and this slightly grey sky this time, so we can see some changes. Okay, similar process. Here comes picture number 3. Okay, we're going to ask ourselves again, what can you see as you look at this image? Don't be afraid to pause the video. This isn't about rushing. Give yourselves time to make a note of some of the things that you can see. I love this image. You've got a change in perspective. It's still a wheat field, but suddenly we can see with a little bit more detail what those wheat sheaves are like. We can get a sense of the texture at the foreground of this picture. The sky has changed again. I like this. We've got either the sun is going down or but yet we can really still see that ball of light over there on the left-hand side of the image. We've got a slightly different building, looks really metallic and these cylinder shapes, so it looks a bit more industrial. Okay, so now we're going to look at image number 4. Now this is our final image. Okay, and all at this stage we're making notes, we're just thinking about what we can see. So I'm just going to select our final image for us. Okay, so what can you see here? Again, we're going to pause the video. We've got that consistent theme of the wheat fields, but I love the way that in each of these images the sky is different. This seems to be a slightly more ominous sky. Look at the billowing clouds kind of coming in overhead, set against the little bit of remaining blue sky. At this stage, the harvesting seems to be a bit further along. Can you see these big hay bales? One really close at the front of the screen, others back in the background there, leading into greener fields. So we're just going to pause and make our notes. Okay, so you can see we've put the 4 images together here. Now, this next activity, I really want to think about how does what you see make you feel? Now, a couple of weeks ago, when we started this journey with Miss Reed, she introduced this word of atmosphere, that writers create atmosphere. Now, atmosphere really means that we want our readers to experience a feeling or a sensation by the time we're done. By the time they've read my sentence, my paragraph, my story, I want my reader to have felt and experienced an emotion. So sometimes before we even start writing, we need to think about the practical of what we're going to describe, which is what we've just made notes on, but we want to tie it with an emotion, with a feeling. So to help us, because sometimes starting to think about our emotions is a bit trickier, I'm going to give us a selection of words. And out of those words, I want you to decide which you would match with a particular image. Now, if you've got your own vocabulary of emotion words and you would trump and say, well, my word's better than your word, miss, I have no problem with you doing that. I want you to think about each of these images again and how they make you feel, what atmosphere they create. The words I'm about to show you are to help if you're not sure of what word to choose. So let's have a look at this. And it says here, which idea best fits the picture, then how do they make you feel? So is there a particular image out of 1, 2, 3, and 4 that makes you feel lonely, that creates maybe an atmosphere of loneliness? Is there one of these images where you would feel the freedom of the space, maybe the scale of the landscape would give you a sense of freedom? So any of these images begin to create the idea of work and having to be industrious and work and be busy. Are there a particular image here that creates a sense of beauty? How about busyness? Do any of these images look particularly busy to you? Do any of these images create a sense or an atmosphere, a feeling of threat? Maybe danger's coming. Now, what about alienation? Alienation is a very similar idea to loneliness, this idea of being alienated and out somewhere on your own. Expanse, do any of these create a sense of size and scale? Sometimes the size and expanse of a place can have an impact on how we feel. We might begin to feel quiet. It might make us feel peaceful or sad and insignificant. Does any of these images make you feel danger or a sense of fear? Any elicit and get you feeling excitement, Do any of these pictures represent a place that you would like to be to find yourself? And any create that sense of mysteriousness, a sense of mystery. So what I want you to do again now is just to pause and to decide which word, which feeling, you could pick more than one, you would best fit, you would match with each picture. Okay, so just make a note of that in your books.